From the heartland of America, it's the Bail in the Midwest podcast, hosted by Shane Rolf. Executive producer, David Stuckman.
Hello and welcome to the Bail in the Midwest podcast, where we explore a variety of topics related to bail, pretrial release, and the criminal justice system in the Midwest. My name is Shane Rolf. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Kansas Bail Agents Association, and I've worked in this field for the past 39 years. Now, sometimes I feel like those of us who work in criminal justice have sort of moved away from our core purpose. From a bail perspective, we get into these little esoteric arguments about with the bail reformers about the constitutionality of bail. And often we go down these rabbit holes of what is constitutional rather than what's right. We find reasons to excuse crime, economic unfairness, racial concerns, etc. So I took a few minutes to look at the Constitution, and while bail is actually mentioned in the Constitution, surprisingly, there's very little in there about crime itself. Only 3 crimes are even specifically mentioned in our founding documents: piracy, counterfeiting, and trespass, or treason rather, not trespass. Obviously, these weren't the only crimes that occurred 250 years ago. But John Adams, during the Constitutional Conventions once said, or afterwards, that our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other kind. Now, without more context and analysis, and there's been all kinds of context and analysis and books written about that one particular phrase, but it can mean lots of different things. But what I take from that is that we, the people, need to govern ourselves as if we know right from wrong, which brings me back to my original concern. Have we lost our purpose? Is the criminal justice system just another jobs program? Do we make and enforce these laws as a type of busy work for those of us who work in criminal justice? Or is it our goal to craft and shape a livable society? And I'm not suggesting that we forget the law and we know what's right, so we'll just do that. We have to be a nation of laws rather than a nation of men, without forgetting that we are governed by men interpreting those laws, and of course women as well. I'm not meaning to exclude. I see criminal defense attorneys who relish at being able to pick apart a case, but when does that cross the line from zealous advocacy to tearing down the very system they work in? Judges become more interested in the nuances of the law than ensuring justice for victims of crime. Progressive prosecutors fostering soft on-crime policies that send clear messages that crime will be tolerated, with every sweetheart plea deal that sends a violent offender back to terrorize their neighborhood, and probably more importantly, tells those neighborhoods in no uncertain terms, you don't matter. So don't bother calling the police. The criminal will be back among you in just a few hours, and after all, snitches get stitches. My guest today hopefully will illuminate this for us a little bit. She has experienced the criminal justice system in a way no one should ever have to. However, she survived and found a new purpose. Patricia Wenskunas, and hopefully I've pronounced that right, Patricia, is a survivor of an attempted murder and the founder of Crime Survivors, an advocacy and support group for victims of crime, or perhaps better said, the survivors of crime. Patricia, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I love the intro. So yes, I love looking back in history too. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I try and put a little bit there to where at least I get my input, whereas the guests take up all the rest of the time. So normally I give a long CV to the guests and let everybody, know how important they are and all their background and why she would listen to them. But I think in your case, the backstory here of how you got to this position is more important. So maybe let's talk about the attempted murder. And I don't want to lessen that by emphasizing the attempted part, because from everything I've read and seen, it looks like you were really close to being a statistic. So how did you cross paths with the person? How did this come about? The crime itself that sparked all this?
And, thank you for mentioning that, because, I've heard through the years a lot of people say, attempted. It was attempted murder, but you weren't murdered, right? You're still here. I even heard the district attorney at one point say something like, Patricia, you survived. Go to the pumpkin patch with your son. Enjoy yourself. I have a lot of other cases. People were murdered. They're no longer here. And so I do think that a lot of people lessen it. And I remember also Marcella Leach. If anybody doesn't know about Marcella Leach, she was Marcy from Marcy's Law, her mom, and I was very close with her. And she used to say to me, like, you're part of our group, not because you died, not because you had a loved one die, but because you almost died. You were very close to almost dying. And I want you to be part of this group. And a lot of people didn't like that. They still don't like that because they're like, well, you survived. You're not part of a group. And so for me, on April 4th of 2002, my personal trainer, he came into my home, drugged me, wrapped my face in head in saran wrap, beat me black and blue, screaming that he was going to kill me and my 12-year-old son. I made a promise to God, because to me, with faith, there is hope, that with each and every next breath, I would live for community above self. I like to think that I've kept that promise all these years later. Probably have taken it way too far of a promise, I guess, because I have sacrificed everything in order to start an organization called Crime Survivors to provide support and guidance to all victims of violent crime. But to go back a little bit, he was charged with deliberate premeditated attempted murder, burglary in the first degree, assault with a deadly weapon, and criminal threats. And through our legal system, he served approximately 120 days, 5 years anger management, and 5 years probation. And for me, I think I probably at the time thought it was like what we saw on TV. Like he's going to get arrested, he's going to get charged, he's going to go away. I don't think I thought for life, but I did think for a significant amount of time so that he couldn't come back and hurt me or my son. He couldn't hurt someone else. I have no idea why he would want to kill me. I have no idea why anybody would want to or could kill anybody or harm or hurt other individuals. It's never been a part of who I am and never will be. But I have to be honest with you, what I thought was difficult and bad back then, I feel like it's worse in this climate today for victims, for survivors. Listen, I believe in bail. I am a strong component and believer in our bail system. I will do whatever I can to ensure that stays around forever, because I do strongly believe in that everybody has a right to bail. I don't believe what a lot of people say about that, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, or you might have some questions or whatever for me. But I really do feel that everybody has a right to have bail, and I think that everybody should and can. And he did make his bail, and he did get out. And he's been on the street ever since. I don't have connection with him, but I will say I have forgiven him. I have forgiven other people that have done me wrong in my life, because it allows me as a survivor, as a thriver, as a mother, as a grandmother, as a community leader, it allows me to live without anger and pain and resentment. Now, that's not to say that I don't have it, because there are days that still I struggle and I'm activated or triggered, and I have an emotion or a feeling or a taste or a touch or a smell comes with power, right? But I am also happy and I'm grateful to the Lord that I'm still alive, and that I'm given another opportunity to take my personal experiences to pass it on to help others.
Well, and I know if anybody watches the podcast, you see me reference TV shows and movies a lot. And this was one that I was sort of thinking about on this and this will be sort of out there, but the opening intro of a show called Deep Space Nine, which was a Star Trek show, and Captain Sisko ended up in the wormhole, and these beings in the wormhole that were not linear time beings. Basically, he was saying, well, we're linear time beings. We move from here to here to here to here. And of course, he was suffering, from a tragedy of having lost his wife in a battle. And they just went to him and touched him on the forehead and said, well, if you're linear beings, why do you live here? And basically that he was stuck in that one spot in his life because of the tragedy that occurred there, and he wasn't able to move on from that spot. And it struck me that a lot of times crime victims are going to be in a similar situation, that this one traumatic event occurs. I mean, other things as well, warriors, other people that have faced traumatic events, but they're stuck in that one spot and they don't move from that spot. And that becomes then defining for the rest of their lives in that one spot, and they can never move or grow or live beyond that. So I get my movie reference in from that point, but I sort of wondering what you thought as far as how do people move on from that? I mean, we're probably getting out of order my questions, but if you are the victim of a crime, how do you then move on from that? I know you've said you've forgiven and moved on because, you can't let that one person and that one thing be the dominant factor of the rest of your life, but how do you move on from that?
And that's interesting that you use that show, that movie as an experience, right? Because many victims and survivors are stuck and can't move on. There's some that we help or support, and people will say to me, "Well, don't you set a timeline on when you can help someone? And why don't you set a timeline?" I'm like, how can you set a timeline on trauma and victimization and survival? It's not my place or job or duty or responsibility to be able to say, okay, here's the magic wand. You're like dawning. It's been 6 months and a year. You gotta get out of bed. There's no rhyme or reason for that. And there are some families of murder, it's been 16 years, they can't get out of bed. How do you tell them their child was murdered? They will never have closure. They will never have a day where they don't think of their child, right? There's rape survivors, there's domestic violence victims that are still stuck. They can't, and no matter what we do or a therapist does, it has to be on their time, whatever hits them. And I don't know what the answer. I'm sure I'd be a multimillionaire if I could bottle that all up in a little bottle and give it to someone. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, it's done, right? Now, yeah, there's something that will take it away. I mean, I wish nobody could ever feel what I've gone through or another victim has gone through. I would never want them to know what that feels like. But I would ask them to be able to have patience and compassion and sympathy and support, no matter if it's the first 24 hours or 16 years or 20 years down the road. Because again, maybe we have victims that come to our organization and maybe for the first 6 months, and then I don't hear from them for 3 or 4 years. And then all of a sudden they'll call me back and say, "Patricia, can I come back to the support group, or can I come to one of your holiday events? I'm really struggling. My brother just passed away, not from crime, but it's triggered me or activated me, or there was a taste or a touch or a smell or a feel, or they had to relocate, or, with now our system changing so much, they're early releasing all of these individuals that were sentenced to 25 to life, and now they're only serving 10 years or 15 years, or they're getting out early because they're at a certain age. And now our system feels that if you're a certain age, you should be released and not serve any more time. And so that re-victimizes the victims, and therefore they still need help and support. So I don't think we can set a time frame on it. I think some victims don't need any help. Some victims need a lot of help. Some need help the first 6 months, and some don't need it after that. So it all really depends on that person, that situation, that circumstance. And I also say there's no two victims alike. Even if it's two domestic violence victims, two families of murder, two rape, sexual assault, elder abuse, whatever, maybe the same crime, but not the same situation, the same circumstance, or the same needs. Some people need stuff. Some people don't need anything. And again, I also feel we should never base it upon income. Whether they have $1 million in the bank, whether they have $1 in their bank account, we want to be there to help and support them. Whether they're Black, whether they're white, whether they're Hispanic, doesn't matter to me. Whether they speak English or they don't, I don't care any of that stuff. I don't ask questions. It's probably why we also don't get any government or federal funding for our organization, because you have to stay in a box, or you have to ask, what is your nationality? What language do you speak? Where do you live? I don't want to ask those questions. I want to ask, are you a victim of a crime, and do you need help and support? And that's it. And I don't want to have strings attached to money. Well, if you do this or you say this, you're not going to get the money. I want to help victims. That's all.
Well, I want to talk about money later on, because there's some other stuff that comes out there. But one of the things I have a note on is victims and self-blaming. I had a partner of mine when I first started this up, the family that helped start the bonding business. he was actually shot. And essentially his girlfriend had stopped at like a convenience store to get a cup of coffee and was bringing coffee to his business. She pulled into the business and somebody tried to carjack her right there. I mean, it was just splits. I mean, if she was 30 seconds later, the guy would have been gone. If she was 30 seconds earlier, she would have been inside. He tried to carjack her. My partner heard her scream and went running outside. And the man basically had tried to fire the gun at the woman when he was stealing the car, and the gun had misfired and jammed. And so when my partner came running out, he cycled the gun back around and shot him in the neck, dropped him. He threw the girl down, grabbed the car, and took off. Didn't die, but had all kinds of problems, damaged his knees from the fall, had all kinds of, surgeries and everything else. But he actually came through that better than she did. And she didn't even realize until they actually had police officer testimony that she probably should have been dead, that the first shot that he fired was against her while he was holding the gun to her, and it didn't go off. She never even realized that. But she could never come past the idea that this was somehow her fault that Bill got shot. And I talked to her about this, like, look, sometimes things just happen. I mean, had the person in front of you at the convenience store fumbled with their change and taken an extra minute, this wouldn't have occurred. Sometimes it's just randomness that you happen to get put in that situation. But how do you help victims that feel like somehow it's their fault that they're the victims of crime or survivors of crime?
Right. Well, and for me, that's personal. It's the same thing like with forgiveness. It's personal. Right. Not everybody can do that. Of course, I say forgiveness is not forgetting. So some people put those in the same bucket. They don't belong in the same bucket. They're completely separate. I have forgiven and I will never forget, right, at the same time. So, but that's more for me than the other individual. And right. Same with victims and survivors and family members. Like, you can forgive doesn't mean you're going to forget. And you can also forgive yourself. If you have something within you that feels, I would try to challenge it with anybody to say, no matter what the situation, no matter what the circumstance was, it is not the victim's fault. We tend to want to ask or question, well, if I would have moved this way, or if I wouldn't have went there, if I would have stopped at the Ralph's instead of the 7-Eleven, or if I would have went around the block, or if my car would have been white instead of black, or, whatever it would have been. To me, at the end of the day, we should never shame, blame, or guilt a victim. But also victims should not also shame and blame and guilt themselves. And I think the reason why some of that happens is because we're looking to be able to justify or find a reason or excuse the behavior of the other person and take on that ourselves. And sometimes, especially more so women, I think, than men, we tend to want to be the mothering spirit. We tend to want to be the caretakers. We tend to want to, I'm not saying men don't, because men do. You guys are the man of the house or the man of the business or the man of the work, or I still believe in that method too. But I'm just saying, for instance, I think women, we want to be the caretakers. It's our job, it's our duty to be able to have children and to take care of them and mother them and nurture them. And when we can't do that for our children or for other people around us, then that challenges our own self, right, to a certain degree. It's kind of like when we all are driving down the car, if you ever have to slam on your brakes, what's the first thing you do? You put your hand over this way to care for other people rather than yourself, right? You want to put the mask on other people rather than yourself, right? But we have to take care of ourselves, and we have to I will challenge them to say, like, let's take a look at this. How do we release that from you to be able to put that to the person that did it? The person that did decide to get in their car, the person that did walk up to your car, the person that did get the gun, the person that pulled the trigger. Like, doesn't that make more sense? And sometimes if people don't catch that, then I'll say to them, what makes you think that you were the one that played the role in it? So we kind of work through that. Like, what could have you done differently, right? How does that look to you? Or I'll say to them, if I told you that this scenario happened, would you say that that was my fault? And most likely they would say, no, it's not your fault at all. Well, then why do you feel the need that you have to take that burden in yourself? right? But I think with counseling, with therapy, whether it's a place of worship to pray and reflect and release, and even ask for forgiveness for yourself. If you feel it's too heavy, it's okay. Ask for forgiveness for yourself and for the other person. But at the end of the day, I would say never, ever blame yourself and never blame others. But it's easier said than done.
Well, I kind of wonder, a couple of 3 points on this. One, you talked about women versus men, and men, I think, tend to be problem solvers. Okay, here's a problem. Let's solve the problem. Here's the answer to that problem. Well, if you hadn't done this, then this wouldn't have happened. And, okay, then we'll move on from that. And so it's easy for men to say, well, if you'd done something differently, you wouldn't have been in that situation, which is unfair. But I mean, obviously, that's kind of a male perspective on that. And then there's sort of the issues. I'm kind of wondering if this is more of a Western world type problem, because we, as people who believe in individual rights, individual determination, do we like to feel that sometimes we're just at the mercy of the world? If I hadn't misstepped, if I hadn't stepped here instead of there, this wouldn't have occurred. Well, yeah, but you can't know those things going forward. That where you're supposed to step every single time. And the other thing that really, and probably more important is, and you can address this hopefully some, is, but a lot of times, like girls especially, but not always girls, sometimes boys, who then go off to college. I've known several examples of girls especially, but one boy as well, within the first 3 months of leaving as a freshman in college, they've gone off to college, and they are sexually assaulted. And oftentimes those reports aren't made because, well, we're going to the bar with all the girls here, and then there's somebody that slips them a roofie or identifies them, and then they're afraid to make the complaint, even to call the police, because, well, I wasn't supposed to be in the bar, and that sort of, and you're dealing with an issue of confronting evil. I mean, these people are predators that are out looking for these people, and it's easy pickings among these people, and there's a 50-50 chance they're never even going to report it if I do this thing. So I guess there's a question in there someplace.
It's I'll answer it without even asking the question,
right,
in a sense, right? Because, and I would say it's a lot larger than 50% in this climate today, in all honesty. I think a lot of victims are not reporting to the police any longer. And it doesn't have anything to do with law enforcement. It has to do with the climate we're in. When they see, like one sexual assault victim said to us, this was a couple of years ago, and she said, why would I go to the police to report when I'm seeing that people are getting a slap on the wrist, or they're not getting in any trouble, or they're going to serve like a 60-day sentence? Like, why am I going to put myself, my family, everybody else through this when there's really no justice? There's really nothing that's going to happen anyway in the long run. So I think because of that reason, a lot of people are not reporting. A lot of people will say, of course, well, I went to the bar. Well, I did go with him, or I did agree to this part, but I said no to this part, or somehow they take that all in within themselves. And to me, I think we should do more prevention, more awareness to our communities, and more to our children to let them know no is no. Our space is our space. No one has a right or responsibility, whatever, to be able to cross that. We have the responsibility to say no and to be able to report someone. I remember telling the police officer in my case, if he would have raped me or sexually assaulted me, I would have never called you. And I remember the look on his face, even at the trauma I was in. I'll never forget the look on his face. And he said, what? Why? I said, been there, done that. No big deal. But I could not call you when he tried to kill me and threatened to kill my son. And that, to me, looking back, that's how I felt. Looking back at that today, I feel sorry for the young woman that I was, that I wouldn't have thought that it would be okay, no matter the situation, no matter the circumstance. And I say now, anybody that comes in my space against my wishes, first and foremost, I'm probably going to take him down to the ground, and I'm going to feel confident and proud of it, which I never would have felt before. And then I'm going to hold them there and I'm going to call the police and have them report it. And no matter if they serve 1 day, no matter if they serve 100 days, no matter if they get guilty or not guilty, I'm going to take the control and power back. And that's what I will challenge all other victims, whether it's at a university, whether it's at a grammar school, whether it's at an elderly person's home, whatever it is, take the control and power back because it's not your fault. We don't deserve to live that life thinking that we can live with all of that pain and trauma and keep it within ourselves, because the other part is it will destroy us. Whether we like it or not, we keep that secret to ourselves of that trauma and pain. It's going to come out in our relationships, in our friendships, in our career, and our work. It's going to come out in different formats, whether it's alcohol or drugs or eating disorders or whatever else it is. You may not know it, but it's going to be there.
So let's kind of talk about some of the triggers here. I mean, this is probably, we're crossing over this ground a little bit as well, but a lot of the things you're describing are, well, let me go back. Let me just step back in here. Another aspect of not reporting that becomes problematic is the way our system is designed. The criminal justice system is an escalation of penalty to try and curb your behavior. Okay, if you have 12 DUIs, but you only got stopped on the 12th time, the system itself, law enforcement, courts, they don't know that you've had those other 11 DUIs and that you're a particular danger. If you've assaulted 6 other women, but only the 6th woman is the one that makes the report, they don't know about the other 5. Whereas if you'd done that beforehand, when it was maybe something smaller, maybe it was what we refer to as a sexual battery, as opposed to a full-blown sexual assault or rape, you get the system involved and you get those steps and you're focused on that person. And then, then it happens a second time. Well, now we're really going to throw the book at this person because we know there's a pattern here. But if we don't know about the pattern, if the system doesn't know about the pattern, how can they throw the book at? How do they get 120 days in custody and 5 years of anger management, as an example, which I think is just egregious. And I do want to talk about that some more as well.
But let me just, if you don't mind, I'm going to interrupt you because we also want to make sure anybody that's listening, I also want to be very clear, no matter what the situation and circumstance is if you choose to not report, it's okay. If you choose to not go to law enforcement, it is okay. We as an organization are going to be here to help and support you no matter if you report or not. I'm going to try to do my due diligence and best I can to guide you to report. But if anybody is out there and you choose not to, there still is help and support for you if you choose not to. I will challenge you to do it in a kind and respectful manner because I don't want to take away, you've already been victimized and taken away something out of your own personal self and space. I don't want to do that to you either. So I will honor and respect if you choose not to report. But I do agree with you. If you report, no matter what the outcome is, maybe it could, and it wouldn't be your fault if you either way. But if you report it, maybe it'll stop or prevent it from happening again to someone else. No guarantees. And if you report or you don't report, still not your fault. It is on the person that committed the crimes. That's their responsibility, their fault. But if we could stop it, that's what ended up happening with some of these larger cases. A lot of people didn't report. And then all of a sudden, the person was arrested and charged. And then all of those people started coming forward because they felt safe enough because that one person was so brave and courageous that it was a trickling effect to allow other people to be brave and courageous and fearless. Sorry.
And again, I'm not trying to to chastise someone for not reporting for those things, but also, keeping in mind, if you could have reported it and you're the type of person who does internalize that, and then you find out that another victim has occurred, if you're the type that that blames yourself for lots of things, is that something else that you're going to pile on as more that you have to carry around with you? I mean, again, obviously it's going to depend on the individual.
Yeah, and hopefully there's a way that we could. Hopefully there's a way we could get to a place where we could stop. Like I always said, in my lifetime, Could we get to a place where we stop shaming and blaming and guilting victims? Because what you'll hear is, even in general conversations, you'll hear people say, oh, she was raped or sexually assaulted. Was she showing a lot of cleavage? Did she have a lot of makeup on? Was she wearing a short skirt? Oh, he punched her in the face, or he hit her, or he was screaming at her. Did she not have dinner on the table at 5 o'clock? Did she not do this? Did she not do that? Or they'll say, oh, he was murdered. Was he in a bad neighborhood? Was he in a gang? And I'm like, why do we do that? Like, no, we need to say, why did he have a gun? Why did he shoot the boy outside the church parking lot? Why did he rape, or why did he feel the need to sexually assault a victim? Why is it okay for someone to punch someone in the face, or to kick them, or call them rotten, filthy names? Like, we need to change that whole mentality, to put it on the offender, the one committing the crime, not the one innocent that's been victimized.
Yeah, very much. So let's talk about the sentence. I know that, some of the other stuff I'm listening to talk about, that there was an issue with the judge, that the attempted murder charge was dismissed. Can you talk about how that came to pass, and then the actions that you took regarding the judge after the fact?
Yeah, so basically what ended up happening is the DA's office ended up taking a plea deal. They did not tell me they were going to take a plea deal. They didn't mention that to me. All of a sudden, I got a phone call and was told, get to court. You have like 20 minutes to get to court. And I'm like, what do you mean today's not a court date? No, just get here. Not told anything. I rush. I get dressed. I get to court. And I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, well, he took a 2-year plea deal. He admitted to everything. He wrote it all down, mentioned everything that he did, matched up with everything. So the DA decided to take a 2-year plea deal. And I remember getting up out of the courthouse and just going outside and throwing up. Like, I was like, what? Like, he's going to come back and kill me. He's going to kill my son. He's going to hurt somebody else. Like, this can't be. I was like, why didn't nobody tell me in advance? Why wasn't I included in the process? Hence is the reason why it's in Marcy's law now, because of my personal case. And my personal case was then written in so that they have to talk at least to the victims prior to making a final decision under a plea deal. But for me, I just didn't understand it. And so what I did, and I didn't know anything about the judge. I didn't know she had been written up by many district attorneys before, that she had a very bad reputation on how she handled her courtroom and proceedings and treated people. I wasn't aware of any of that. But for the day of sentencing, I ended up getting a bunch of my friends together. I ended up calling the media, knowing nothing about any of this stuff. And I got picket signs made, and I picketed outside the courthouse, like equal rights, victims' rights. Like, why do victims not have rights? I couldn't understand why are offenders read their Miranda rights and victims have nothing. Like, we weren't told anything back then. So we picketed the courthouse, and then at the sentencing, the judge was like, what, to the district attorney? Well, I see your victim's here today. She doesn't like you. She doesn't like our plea deal. She's picketing my courthouse. She doesn't like what we've decided. So you know what? Let's give her another chance. We're going to take this to trial. I'm going to throw out the plea deal, and we're going to give her another chance at the trial. And I thought that was fantastic. I thought, oh my God, like, he's going to go away now. He's not going to hurt anybody else, right? I didn't realize then how she was going to come for me, because I had picketed her courthouse. I had embarrassed her in the media. Supposedly, she told the DA, no victim's going to humiliate me. So during the trial, she was awful to me. At one point, she got up off the bench, came over to me, took my rosary, took my son's picture out of my hand, and said, I see you have a rosary in your son's picture, but it's making too much noise. You need to set it down. She asked me more questions than his attorney asked. She, at the end of all of this, yes, she dismissed the deliberate premeditation off the attempted murder and the criminal threats charges. And one of the court reporters came over to me in tears at the end and patted me on my shoulder and said, I'm so, so sorry. Like, we wanted to find him guilty, but because of what the judge did, we couldn't. And so they had recommended max sentencing, as well as probation recommended under those charges that he was found guilty. He was recommended for 8 to 10 years. But the judge during the final sentencing said, I see you're asking for all of this stuff of restitution. We're not going to give all that to you. We're not going to pay for your bed. Why would we pay for the bed? Like, that's unnecessary. And I was like, well, because he attacked me in the bed and I couldn't go back and sleep in the bed and I threw it away. Well, we're not going to do that. And she said, he showed up to court all the time. He's well dressed. He's well mannered. He has a 2-year-old. He has another baby on the way. So I'm going to sentence him basically to time served, which was 120 days, 5 years anger management, and 5 years probation. But she was awful. Yes, she was. She stopped to do several other misdemeanor cases and just treated me very unfairly and awful.
In the middle of a felony trial, to break up the continuity of the trial, well, let's stop and, hey, jury, take half the day and we'll, deal with a couple of other things on my docket. I mean, again, that's only coming from my perspective, seeing how this, works normally. They normally don't do that. If they've got some misdemeanor case, we'll have some temporary judge go handle this scheduling and get it set over. We don't stop a full-blown, attempted murder charge in the middle of trial. So,
which is at the end of it all, what I ended up getting my strength from. And sometimes I have it and sometimes I don't, but I always tell people I think I went from being like I had victim on my forehead before, like I was very vulnerable, very naive, very whatever. And now I feel like I went from a mouse to a bear to a grizzly, and I'm still trying to find my middle ground. I laugh about it all the time, but I'm like, when I got just whatever I had that came to me. And I never went to law school. I never was, ever wanted to do anything like that. But I went and started studying, and I remember one of the law schools here, just not as a student, but just to look through the books. They let me go in their library. And then I actually filed a citation against the judge, which a victim, they had said at that point, they told me the state of California had never had a victim file a citation against a judge. The DAs had, but not a victim. And when they called me and they said to me, they gave her the opportunity after my case, because of my citation, you either retire with your benefits without ever coming back on the bench, even as an extra judge, paid, which some of them do, go back on as retired judges. But you can't come back. You get your retirement, or we remove you from the bench from this, and you will not get qualified for whatever. And so she decided to take her retirement, which gave me a lot of, gave me justice to a certain degree, because then I feel like she couldn't re-victimize anybody else. Now, I don't know who she is as a person. I don't have any problem with her as a person. She could be a great person. I don't know. But she's not a person that should be on the bench, because I feel like her integrity, her character, what she took an oath of office, what she stood on with her robe and with her gavel and with her whatever, she did not follow through with. And so therefore, it was very important to me. And I feel that I did get a part of justice from that situation and circumstance.
So are the judges in that area, are they what we refer to here as merit selection? Are they elected? How do they pick judges in that area?
So they're elected, but then they're also, depends if the governor decides to go ahead and assign people to that whatever, then they can do that as well.
That's sort of a hot button issue here in Kansas, where I'm right now. It's 105 counties in the state, and it's about a 50-50 ratio of whether they are elected judges or if they're subject to merit selection, which is an argument that we'll pick the best and the brightest, and the governor will pick from those three to determine who's going to be on there. It's basically backdoor politics as opposed to out open in the public type politics.
It's probably it's the same here. I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm always saying to people, we don't know anything about judges. It's the one elected seat that we typically know nothing about.
Right.
And I think we need to learn and know more, because there's some phenomenal judges that played by the book and they do their job and they do what they're supposed to do. And there's others that play politics and they don't.
Well, and oftentimes it also will depend on the case, because I've seen judges that are just straight down the middle, but then, abortion being a big political hot button issue, if a case like that gets in front of them, well, then all these rulings go to one side or the other. And it's like, okay, so I mean, that's clearly a political decision that, it's one of the things I've said in this is there's a lot of gray areas in the law, and judges will fill in those gray areas with their own personal beliefs. If there's a gray area, that's where they're going to, and not necessarily that they're evil or doing anything wrong, but this is how I feel. And the laws, there's a wiggle room in the law. So I'm going to rule on this side of it versus this side. Now, it sounds to me like in your case, the judge was just like, fine, if you're not going to take the plea deal, if you're going to embarrass me, well, then I'm going to put you, victim, on the stand and make you subject to cross-examination and all the pain and suffering that goes with it. Because a lot of times these deals are taken because the victim doesn't really feel like getting up on the stand and having to tell the world, even if it's just a courtroom full of, 5 people, what happened there and revisit all that pain again. And so I can see her sitting there going, oh, you know what? I'm going to make you pay for this, by doing this again, and then dismiss the most serious charges.
And it should never be that with victims and survivors and family members. It should never be like a game board. Like I had been told one time, a long time ago, by a DA, it's like a game board in the back of our offices. Like, okay, you take this case, we'll dismiss this case. We'll take this case, we'll go fight for this case. This case is not as important as this case, so we'll just do this plea deal, whatever else. And I was like really offended by that. I understand it to a professional degree, what they're saying. It's how it was expressed and how it was said that offended me, I think, because no matter what victim it was, no matter what case it is, it's not a game. It's our lives. And no matter what the situation or what the evidence or what the circumstance is, like, no, and we shouldn't even express that anyway, because like it's not acceptable to the person that you're trying to fight for to be able to get justice for. And I remember one statement was made that they didn't expect me to overhear, and I heard the DA and the advocate say, she's such a victim. She cries so much. And I'm like, yep. Like, and to me, like wherever that person is at, we need to meet them. And one is not worse than another one. Like it isn't. I mean, I know the ultimate is the worst of the worst is to have your child murdered, family member, loved one, whatever. But we shouldn't be in the business of comparing one crime to another.
Well, I mean, I can see a DA going, the defense attorney going, man, I have a great victim here. She's going to cry in the stand and the jury's going to love her. And you better take this plea deal that I'm offering you. It doesn't sound like what was going on, but.
And that happens too, because I remember about 5 years ago, I got a call from a DA saying to me, Patricia, this is so-and-so. And I didn't really know him at the time. And he's like, I got your information and you're helping my victim. And like, can you stop working with her until after the trial? And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, because like you're making her like this strong victim, this survivor, this thriver. I need her to be the victim on the stand. And I said to him, I think you called the wrong person. Because no, I'm not going to stop working with her. And no, I'm not going to stop her from being a survivor and thriver till after the trial. That's so unfair for her. And no matter how much I help her, when she gets on that stand, she's going to be the victim because she's now having to relive over everything that happened. And so, yes, maybe her mentality will be a little bit different, but no, I can't stop working with her.
Well, I mean, and they're coming from a good place at that, and they have their particular goal, and we want to lock this guy up. And if you seem cold and clinical and everything on the stand, like you've dealt with all this, the judge is going to be like, she's fine. We're not going to make this guy pay for that sort of thing. So let's talk about Crime Survivors itself, the organization. I've read over one of the really cool, I've read a little bit of the website. One of the really cool things I noticed, looking at the top of it is like, if you need to get off this page in a hurry, and there's a little click button there. I'm like, oh, where's this go? And it's like pops up to chocolate chip cookies. And it's like, so that is awesome. That quick escape that is all quick. You can go here. And if somebody comes along, wanting to know what's going on, if you're, the victim of regular abuse in the house or something like that, and you're checking this out, we'll go over here. It was a nice little touch that, surely shows that you thought that sort of stuff out. But tell me what you guys do. I mean, maybe in a nutshell, and go in depth on some of the stuff. What do the Crime Survivors do for victims? Or
And it was very important. It was very important that we work with all victims of violent crime. So families of murder, survivors of attempted murder, rape, domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, elder abuse, human trafficking victims, knowing that we can't do everything, nor should we do everything. I always say an organization can't do everything, and nor should they. And so for me, it was really about bringing awareness that crime happens. It happens everywhere, no matter what state you're in, no matter where you live, no matter what city, county, happens everywhere. Prevention, how do you prevent it from happening, to really be able to get out there and bring the awareness to prevent it. Now, even if it happens, doesn't mean that it's your fault, right? Doesn't matter what the situation and circumstance is. But if we do like self-defense and safety classes with a great organization that we partner with, whether it's we go out and we do town halls to talk to people, and then, just being able to collaborate and partner with, I think law enforcement is phenomenal. I think district attorneys are phenomenal. I think, all the victim advocates and the shelters and the agencies are phenomenal. I think, obviously there's a small percentage everywhere that may not be, but the majority of them sacrifice so much in order to help victims and survivors day in and day out. So to collaborate and partner with law enforcement, service providers, advocates, agencies, whoever we can, is so important, because we can't do this alone. We are better and stronger together when we collaborate and partner together, right? And then, advocacy. How do we advocate on behalf of those that have been victims and don't have a voice? So for me, it's being a voice for the voiceless, being side by side with victims and survivors and family members, but also whether it's going to Washington or Sacramento, or it's going to our local elected officials to be able to say, like, we need your help, we need your support, we need your partnership, we need stronger laws. We need to make sure that victims and survivors are not forgotten, and offenders and criminals were always at the top of the list. We need to make sure that we provide equal to the victims and the survivors. So to kind of be that voice in a sense. And then healing. How do victims and survivors heal? Where do they go to find hope? Where do they go to find that they're not alone, and that they're not shamed or blamed or guilted? And no matter what, however long it takes them to find that, whether it's support groups, whether it's diapers and wipes for their babies, whether it's food and clothing, whether it's help getting them into a shelter or referring them to lawyers. We work with many that are phenomenal, and making sure that they have that referral and that resource. So that's why it's the Crime Survivors Resource Center, because yes, we can do stuff here, but we can't do everything. So we want to be able to say, like, what do you need? And we also don't dictate what they need. We kind of do an intake. We find out where they're at, what do they need? And sometimes they have no idea what they need. So we go through a running list to find out what it is we can help or support them with. And maybe they don't need something today, but I always say to them, if you don't need something today, reach back out to us in 6 months. Or is it okay that we reach back out to you and check on you and see if there's anything that we can help and support? We do a lot wrapped around the holidays, because the holidays can be very triggering and activating. And, some survivors don't want to celebrate. And we want them to know it's okay to still celebrate, right? And it's okay to be able to go out and have fun with your children during the holidays, or the child that's left. I remember the little boy that said, well, my sibling was murdered and no longer here, but my mom doesn't pay attention to me anymore. So we want to make sure that we can kind of strengthen and empower the mom so that she can also be there with the children that are still remaining, and then also continue the legacy of the child that's no longer here in that capacity. So whatever we can do to help and to support, that's what we're here for.
Well, and you can see how people would want to basically, pull back and sort of emotionally detach, trying to avoid pain in the future. Well, what if something happens in the future, and what if something happens to this other child? I don't want to have to go through that. I mean, it's a disservice to your child. I mean, and it doesn't necessarily have to be children. I mean, you look and go, well, I still have my kids, but you could see that in just your own relationship with your husband, your significant other, or wife, whatever. If I don't want to be suffering that sort of pain again, and so I'll remove myself and cocoon myself away from all this, to where, and that's one of the things that comes a lot with substance abuse, is you're using that as a crutch to get through this, so that whatever pain I suffered, whatever that original trauma was, and people forget that mental trauma is so much worse than physical trauma. Break your leg, well, we'll go in a cast for, 8 weeks, walk around for a while. And, it'll be a little off. And, maybe when the weather turns, it'll ache a little bit. But that's nothing compared to if you've been traumatized mentally. You'll carry that around with you for the rest of your life in various forms. So, I mean, you could see people, wanting to pull away from it. All right, so I'm monologuing here, so I'll get away from that. So you also, it shows on your website, you provide other things: victim emergency bags, meal baskets, backpacks, and school supplies. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, we have our education program. We usually provide anywhere from $350 to $450, depending on the year, the budget, the money that's coming in or not, to school kids so that they can go back to school with a backpack and school supplies, because the families sometimes struggle with that. We have our education fund where we will pay for laptops, computers, a lot of iPads that we distribute. Sometimes, depending on the situation and circumstance, we can cover different things for a survivor to go back to school and cover their books. So we have a scholarship program. We have a hope fund. So depending if they need transportation, if they need food, if they need clothing, we just provided a stroller to a domestic violence survivor that was going to be delivering twins and no way to be able to afford the twin stroller. So we do that as well. We do a lot wrapped around the holidays. We usually help anywhere upwards from $350 to $650 during the Thanksgiving season. We just provided over $14,000 worth of gift cards for Thanksgiving meals, over 50 baskets, turkey baskets this Thanksgiving. So that was phenomenal. And then for Christmas, last year we helped 1,200. I'm not sure we'll help as many this year, but we usually do a day of bowling, and then we give away food gift cards, and we give away toys. Last year we gave over 7,000 toys at Christmas time. So we do a lot of that as well, because again, I think 'tis the season to be able to help and allow survivors and victims. And what the most beautiful thing beyond the toys, beyond the groceries, beyond any of that, is when we have our events. I had asked the survivors, we bring them together every year for a focus group to ask them what they need rather than us deciding what they need. And I thought about getting rid of our events so that we could invest that money into other things like rent or utilities or other things that's really needed during this climate. And the interesting thing is all of them said, no, please don't take the events away, because those events, we've become friends with other survivors. Some survivors mentor, like through our mentorship program, they help each other. They feel normal around other people, even though it's different situations and circumstances, right? We do our monthly support group, our Art for Healing classes, our self-defense and safety classes. It brings them together to be able to bond and really to feel like they're not alone.
Well, and I think people forget just how life-altering a domestic violence situation can be, especially if it's husband and wife. The husband is the primary breadwinner, and suddenly that entire household is pulled apart. The husband's off someplace else. I mean, it's like divorce, only worse. And that it's sudden and it's violent, and that. So when you're talking about backpacks for school, well, you don't really think about, wait a second, now the kids don't have the money to go to school. And what situation does that put the kids in? Coming right back to this domestic violence thing. And so how do we, as a society and organizations like yourself, how do we step in and help people at least maintain some small degree of continuity?
Well, and it's like the children that are molested and abused. The one little girl that was molested in her bedroom, and the family couldn't move. They didn't have the finances or the money to be able to relocate, to move out of the home that they grew up in. They'd have to sell the home, everything else. So they couldn't relocate. But the little girl, she couldn't sleep. So the mom was like, I don't know what to do. So I was like, get rid of everything. Everything that she's okay, but include her in the process, even as little as she was. So they got rid of everything out of the room, and we ended up covering new paint. She got a wallpaper strip on the wall. She got a new bed. She got to pick out her own sheets and mattress and all of that stuff, a new dresser. She got to pick out her own lamp. She chose her color, everything. And I always get teary-eyed with this because I'll never forget the mom saying to me, calling me and saying, she slept tonight. She slept. And it's something that you don't realize that could be possible. And that's why I always tell our donors and supporters, like, it's sometimes the small things that are the huge things. And if it's going to allow a child to sleep, then get rid of everything and start fresh in the new room, right? Or include the person, no matter what their children or not. And sometimes to be able to see these children even wanting a pair of socks. Or like I just said, we were talking over the weekend in regards to our toy drive that's going on now. I said, you don't realize what a toy truck or a Barbie doll or a stuffed animal could do to a child victim that's been traumatized. And if those little toys could speak, the trauma that they would share, none of us would ever want to hear or endure. But they help that child to give them hope, to know they're not alone, to give them healing, and to even have a friend within a toy. So I say if anybody's considering giving toys, don't necessarily have to give to us, but if you want to give something and give a little bit of a glimmer of hope to someone that's been victimized, please consider that this holiday season for sure.
So people, I want to talk about funding too, but people can go to crimesurvivors.org and simply donate there as well.
Yes.
Okay, crimesurvivors.org, all one word, .org. All right. So, I mean, you're primarily California-centric, correct? Or do you
Correct,
have...
yeah.
Okay.
So,
I mean,
we're Southern California, but I also never turn anybody away. So if someone from Kansas or Canada or Michigan or Missouri call us, which we do get a lot of calls out of state, I will take the time to at least refer them to someone local, whether it's a family justice center, a trauma recovery center, a resource center, even if it's a victim advocate through the district attorney's office in their area, we always refer.
So you can refer people to other groups, or if there's someone in an area that doesn't really have that, and and they're like, hey, I want to get involved, I want to do something, is it the sort of thing that you would help them set up the type of organization you have in their area, even if it's just one or two people to help out with that?
Absolutely. I would be happy to help anybody. If any, through the years, I always say I'm not an expert. I know nothing about nothing. I'm just a girl over here trying. But if I can pass on anything that I've learned these past 22 years, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it is, I'm happy to share. And if someone else wants to start an organization to help people, I'll be the first person to do whatever I can to help.
All right. So let's talk about funding a little bit, because I know we're kind of getting to the end of our time here, but it was just in the news here a couple of days ago, Nicole Shanahan, who was RFKJ's running mate when he was running as a Democrat, and she's the ex-wife of, I think it's Sergey Brin, one of the founders of Google, was doing an interview and talking about what she called the tech wife mafia. Was funding a lot of soft on crime advocacy groups out of a sense of social justice concerns. And she said, for example, that she believes, as having written $1 million checks to various groups, that she really believed that she was helping minority communities rise up. But now, the crime's worse. The problems are worse. Crime is worse. Mental health is worse. So how can groups like yours reach out to these kinds of donors? Because we've done podcasts about the donor class funding groups that are actually working to release more people from jail, fund these progressive prosecutors, that sort of thing. So how can a group like yours, given that women are often the victims of crime, it would seem like a natural fit that a group that styles itself as the tech wife mafia would want to support groups like yours that helped women, especially who are victims of crime, rather than helping people that are out committing the crimes as some sort of indication of how horrible the country is.
Well, I would love to get a meeting with some of those people. I would love to be able to share my expertise and feelings. And even though I say I have no expertise in anything in that arena, like I could tell them where to put their money that would make a great difference and impact in the community, and to really reach the whole family unit, because you also have family units that become victims and then they go on and commit crimes, which is not okay ever. Two wrongs don't make a right. But they go on and commit crimes because there's not the help and support for the whole family unit to be able to break the cycles of victimization and trauma, right? I have not figured out how to get to individuals with a lot of money, because I feel like our organization, and I could be wrong because I'm giving our organization a lot of kudos, but we stretch the penny so far, and we can't even even reach the people we want to reach because we can't get the donations, we can't get the funding, we don't get the $1 million checks. And those individuals, those wives that have invested millions and millions of dollars through the George Soros Tides Foundation, through other agencies and organizations, and they're helping the offenders and criminals. And I kept saying, well, I'm not saying don't help them if you want, but can we at least get half? Like, I'm like Mark Zuckerberg, Ben and Jerry's ice cream, all of them people are millions of dollars towards Prop 47, Prop 57 here in California or in other states, helping the offenders and criminals. But what about the victims and survivors? Give us a chance. Like, if anybody's listening, please get me a meeting with one of those mafia women or those families or whatever. And I remember somebody saying, but you don't want to take money from bad people. And I'm like, okay, I understand in a certain degree. I don't want to take money. Like, I was offered $1 million to not say anything on Prop 57, but I was like, I'm not taking that money. I'm going to speak out against it because it doesn't support victims of crime. But if it's $1 million to help victims and survivors, I would take it in a second, and I would make sure that money helped thousands and thousands and thousands of victims. And not only that, is to also reach out to individuals that are struggling, especially our youth. Our youth are dealing with mental illness and mental crisis. They're dealing with, being rooted into crime areas. And we have so much more that we can do as a society. So I have no idea how we reach them, but if you know, please let me know.
Well, maybe we can send Nicole Shanahan a link to the podcast here, and so she can
Right.
kind of check there. So one last thing, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. George Gaston is gone from Los Angeles. What did his election do to crime and crime victims in Los Angeles?
It destroyed it. It destroyed relationships. It destroyed partnerships. It destroyed victims and survivors. It re-victimized victims and survivors when he was in office. And it was just devastating to be able to, and we were part of that. We were devastated by it. We experienced it firsthand. It was not good situation and circumstances. And God bless him and his family. I'm glad that he's out of office, that he's not there anymore. Wish him all the best and well wishes. But I'm glad that he's not there anymore and that we have a DA in LA County now that believes in victims and survivors and that believes in balancing the scales of justice and represents public safety. And to me, that makes all the difference. It really does. And to be able to just make sure that we have a system, because we are in crisis now, with suicides being higher than ever, with mental health and mental illness, drugs, alcohol, DUIs higher than they've been. So I think we do need people in office that really do believe in balancing the scales of justice and not forgetting the victims and survivors.
Well, and I think a lot of criminal justice is about finding balance. I mean, you can go way overboard. You can do the El Salvador model and lock up everybody and, crime will go down. But then you have this huge population of people that are locked up. You can go completely the other way and go, well, we're only going to deal with the most serious of crime. But then everything else, it makes life unlivable, to the general population. So, I mean, I think balance is a big issue in all things, but especially
the pendulum swings back and forth always.
Yeah.
And I always say, why does it have to go so far left, so far right? Why does it have to go like that? Why can't we just come to the center somewhat, join each other at the table and find out what's working for all of us as a community, as a society, and keep humanity in mind? And people tell me I'm too naive, that that's never going to happen, but I can still have hope that will happen someday.
Well, the problem is balance. It's a middle ground that you don't really have a whole lot of people that are activated to support the middle.
Right.
The loud voices are on both sides and it pushes them back and forth. And if you're lucky, the pendulum kind of stays in the middle. I mean, that's the whole idea of a two-party system is, well, we have, both sides, we compromise and it gets in the middle. And I think we've kind of gotten away from that compromise that gets us to the middle. Anyway, a couple of podcasts I've watched you be on, it sounds in those, although it certainly doesn't sound like here today, that you're, working to maybe step back, pass the reins, or, to make sure that the organization that you founded here continues on and endures past your active everyday involvement. What does the future hold for you and crimesurvivors.org?
Well, I didn't know I was passing the reins to anybody, so that
Okay,
was
all right.
but maybe
I got some mention about that, I wasn't out at 3:00 in the morning counseling victims. So maybe it sounds to me like you're still very active.
I'm very active. I mean, obviously, my goal and objective is to continue on the legacy even when I'm not here anymore. So whether that's someday I'm able to, I don't know, go to work on a cruise ship or at Polly's Pies or something, or whether or not I pass on and the good Lord calls me. Whenever that time comes, I'm hoping that the organization continues and that someone will come in and continue my legacy and grow it and make it even stronger than what I've had. Right? I truly do believe that. But there are days now where I wonder because I see what it's like raising donations. I see what the climate is. And it's not the climate that feels good like I did years ago feeling that, right? So whatever is meant for the organization, if it continues, if it doesn't continue, in all honesty, I trust in the Lord. And that's for me, is that with faith there is hope. And so if God wants to continue it, he will make it happen. And if not, then that's okay too. And that's what I've always said. Like, if donations stop tomorrow, if we're unable to help or support, then that's my sign to be able to go on and continue to do something else. And I'm okay with that. I just hope it's enough. I hope what I've done and what I've sacrificed these 22 years, I hope it's enough.
Well, is enough for you, or is it enough for society as a whole? And I think those, you're definitely in I'm getting into heaven's side on both of those issues. So, I do think it's important that you have, because I mean, one of the arguments is, well, we'll just put tax money and we'll throw it to the victims advocacy people in the DA's office, and they'll take care of all that. But then you become just this government bureaucracy that loses the empathy, that loses the personal connection. It's just a job. Here, check this box. And I think having people involved who've been survivors of crime and that can advocate and empathize with other people in those situations is so much better than just, well, I think healthcare was described with the efficiency of something else and the compassion of the IRS. And so you lose a lot of that personal connection, that personal mission when you convert it into a government bureaucracy. Even though the money's better, you've got the money for you, doesn't necessarily get to the victims and get the people working in that are the true believers in the mission.
Well, it's definitely bureaucratical. Now, I love the victim advocates. I think they're doing a phenomenal job. And I think that many of them are survivors and many of them are passionate and compassionate and make sacrifices, and they should be paid more. They are so underpaid. It's incredible to me how they deserve to be double paid or triple pay of what they're getting, to be honest with you. But because they're government, they don't get paid as they should be paid. And they do a phenomenal job, but I could never work in there doing that because the bureaucratic stuff that you have to deal with is on another level. And we can provide this, but we can't provide that. And there's reasons behind it because of it. But it is better to have an outside where you don't have to set that boundary. And if a victim needs something, that you can provide it without having this book that you say, you can only provide these 10 items, not these 10 items, right?
Right.
And so to me, I think that makes it challenging. But that's why I love to collaborate and partner with them, because whatever we can do to help and support and offset that, I think it's really good as a nonprofit.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. It's an incredible story. It's really uplifting that you've taken what would be the worst aspect of someone's life and turned it into helping other people. There's a certain group of people that can do that, and then they're few and far between. And we're just lucky that people like you are out there that can do that and turn these tragedies into positive outcomes for everyone else who's suffering from those. But again, Patricia, thank you very much for talking to us today. I really appreciate it. And again, crimesurvivors.org is the website, right?
That is the website, absolutely. And thank you so much. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank you for being able to be a voice for the voiceless and a voice for yourself and other people as well. I think it makes all the difference. And for anybody that's listening today, if you need help or you need support, go to crimesurvivors.org, give us a call, and just please know it's not your fault and you're not alone.
Excellent. Great advice.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We would like to thank our guest, Patricia Wenskunas, for taking time to talk to us today. I encourage people to support crime survivors. They can be found at crimesurvivors.org or support similar groups in your area. Or if there are no groups in your area, contact them about setting one up. They'll be happy to help you. It is so important to remember that for every crime, there's a victim, even so-called victimless crimes. And we should not forget about these victims of crime. But please join us on the next episode of the Bail in the Midwest podcast, where we'll continue to bring you critical information and conversations with people involved in the criminal justice system. Thanks, guys.
Join us again next time for the Bail in the Midwest podcast, hosted by Shane Rolf and executive produced by David Stuckman.